Hello, Grace. How are you?
Rob, how are you?
Oh, for some reason it didn't pick up the first word. Maybe your
Oh,
mic was tuning in. Let's just try again. Hopefully
sure.
it'll. Hello, Grace. How are you?
I'm good, Rob. How are you?
Very well, thank you. At the end of a long week, and thank you ever so much for making time for this interview about this interesting tactic you've been doing in your fundraising. Just before we get into the content, what's the name of the charity where you work for, and what's your role?
I'm Grace Cannings. I work for Cure Parkinson's and I am a major gifts fundraising officer. And I've been there for about 3 years now, which is it's gone by very quickly.
Yes, okay. And I remember about 6 or 7 months ago, you joined our Major Gifts Mastery program, and
Mhm.
I really enjoyed getting to know you through that and hear about some really interesting things you've been doing for the last half year. And then just recently, last week, you sent me a really interesting little image, a photo of one of the tactics that you've done since starting the Major Gifts Mastery program. And I thought it was so smart that I wanted to find out a little bit more about what you've done and how it's helped you and your colleagues. So do you want to just tell us the gist of what that tactic was, and then we can explore some detail after that?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, the course was fantastic, and I came away feeling so uh, enthused and I don't know, had loads of great ideas about what we could do, kind of swirling around in my head. And I just thought, I'm going to forget all of this. I'm just not going to be able to uh, enact everything that I want to do. And there were a couple of key, really easy, actionable things that you spoke about and you talked about. And I just thought, I need these written somewhere where I can see them every day, so I can kind of keep them in the forefront of everything that I do. And I kind of spoke to my manager about this, and we both got really excited because we've been having loads of catch-ups after the training session about these really brilliant ideas. And so basically we came up with the Cure Parkinson's philanthropy philosophies. And it's very easy, just a quick 5 minutes with a whiteboard. And we've just written down, I think it's maybe 10 things that we want to try and do every day to kind of keep ourselves working in the best way that we can. And they're all really simple, actionable things that don't really cost any money or don't, it's just changing and shifting our mindset. So we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. And yeah, and so we all kind of got round together around the whiteboard and wrote down the things that were important to us as a team. And so far it's been good. It's just been a nice thing to have in the office.
So that's brilliant, Grace. I'm looking at it now, and I love this as an approach to make these ideas, these principles, these philosophies, as you call them, more alive, more conscious, and so on. Could so that our listeners could get a sense of it, could you give us a flavor of some of those things?
Yeah, sure. So we've got things like call your donors, it might make their day or yours. We've got things like give your donors an opportunity to solve a problem, stories, 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 thank on anniversaries. Our data officer will be very happy about this one, but if it's not on Donify, it didn't happen. And yeah, and then the other one is sneak peek and inside scoops, so giving people behind the scenes knowledge, basically. So yeah, there are a couple of them.
So I love it, and one reason I love it is it really reminds me of a fascinating chapter in one of my favorite books, which is called The Culture Code. So if you're a leader of a fundraising team, or you're just interested in the power of culture to affect fundraising results, I really would recommend the book called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. And broadly, the thesis of the book is he was fascinated by why some cultures are so effective and strong and likely to bring out the best out of people, and other cultures are weaker. And even if you've got good people in the team, the culture can have an effect on productivity and morale and stress levels and so on. And I love the premise of the book because basically he looked at highly successful, I mean, outrageously successful team cultures in lots of arenas. And kind of inevitably, a couple of those are really elite military units like the Marines and so on.
Mhm.
But equally, a couple of sports teams that have massively outperform other teams with the same levels of finance available to them. He even went and researched a particular group of jewel thieves who were more
Really?
successful than it seems than any other group at doing jewelry heists. You know, the ethics of all this notwithstanding, he was just fascinated by what is it that makes any group of people, be it a family, a team, you know, an organization, what are the ingredients that cause a team to be more likely to do more of the right things on any given day, and for everyone to buy into that and to do those things whether or not the leader is there. And it makes for a really interesting read. And there's a range of tactics that he talks about, but the tactic that springs to mind in terms of this conversation is he talks about this very, very successful restaurateur called Danny Meyer. I think he's more famous in the US than the UK, but one of his projects is Shake Shack. But he also has a number of high-end restaurants, and I might have the details wrong, but as I understand it, his restaurants have more. He owns more Michelin-starred restaurants than pretty much anyone else in the US and possibly in the world. And so Daniel Coyle is fascinated as to, you know, how did he pull this off? Because you've got to be more than just a good chef to do that. And the interesting story in the interview is that when Danny Meyer went from running one very successful restaurant in New York to then opening a second one on the other side of town, and was spending so much of his time in the new restaurant and not in the first one. And this particular occasion when he heard from his head waiter about something that had happened, and I think the gist of it was a diner had ordered the fish, changed her mind. There's nothing wrong with the fish, but she changed her mind and asked for the pasta or whatever. And then at the end of the meal, the waiter was annoyed because he charged her for both meals because there was nothing wrong with the first meal. And Danny Meyer was furious because it doesn't matter if there's nothing wrong with the fish. This is just not what you get in my restaurants. We always go the extra mile to help you have a good time, whether or not it was our fault. Anyway, in that moment, he realized it wasn't the waiter's fault that the waiter didn't think the way Danny Meyer does. And he realized it's not enough for me to be a good chef or good at creating a beautiful decor in a restaurant. My real job, if I really want to help lots of people enjoy lovely meals, is I have to work out ways for even if I'm not in a restaurant, for people to know what to do and to know why to do it to a certain standard. And so he started putting way more effort into how you help people understand certain key principles of what it is to work in one of his restaurants and what we mean by great service. And he came, part of how he does that is with what he would call these principles or key mantras, which interestingly don't mean much to anyone who doesn't work there. Like, they could just sound like a bunch of banal, cheesy quotes you'd see on a tweet or, an annoying thing on the internet. There's starting the list. Read the guest, athletic hospitality, writing a great final chapter, turning up the home dial, because a key part of his culture is we want people to feel like it's great food, but they feel as comfortable as if they were at home. Put us out of business with your generosity. And, he realized that in that last story, had he ever really helped the head waiter understand that last principle, then it would be an easy decision for the waiter to know whether or not to charge for the fish. Just if in doubt, be outrageously generous. That is the right thing to do. So I really thought of this great restaurateur and this book when I saw your list, Grace, because it seems to me that, you know, lots of fundraisers might hear some of your principles and say, yeah, Grace, I know that one. Yeah, we do our best to do that too. And yet to me, the devil is in the detail. The power to me is not that they have to be beautifully written, but the fact that you and your colleagues thought about them, talked about them, and wrote them down. And if you both felt strongly about them, they got on the list. The act of doing this consciously, it's my sense that because you did that, you've been more likely to make certain decisions and do things certain ways and live up to high standards in terms of certain fundraising principles than if you hadn't written the list. And I love this as a tactic. And maybe after listening to this, some of our listeners, you know, might go away and work out what their key principles are. They don't have to be mine and they don't have to be yours, but getting conscious and clear about them and more explicit about them could just make the difference to doing things in a certain way. So I don't know what you think about that before we get into the detail, that as a kind of as a hypothesis for why this can be so powerful.
Yeah, I think the key word there is conscious. You're making a conscious decision to do something based on the fact that it's written. Well, we've consciously decided what they're going to be, but then we're consciously deciding to do them because we've got that reminder. And it's been so helpful because, I don't know, you come on a training course and you get so excited and you think, yeah, I'm going to be able to do that. But when you've got 20 emails in your inbox from, I don't know, the finance team, you get so bogged down in the kind of, in your kind of the admin sometimes of your job that sometimes you forget that it's the donor that's important, or you forget that it's everything you do should be trying to build those relationships. And these things are things that you can do to help build those relationships. And because they're there and they're conscious and they are present in the office where everybody can see them in very bad handwriting, I will say, but it just means that it's there and you're more likely to do it. And I think one of the things that you spoke quite a lot about was about continuity and about being the level of stewardship that you give being kind of being kind of having that continuity and being able to give a certain level and having those touch points with donors. And you're more likely to do those sorts of things and give that same level of stewardship if I find I am anyway, if I've got those reminders there. Yeah, I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And maybe to bring it to life a little, do you want to sort of give us a couple of examples of how in the last few months you have found yourself doing more of any of these principles?
Yeah, I'd say a key one has been calling our donors. So, and that's one of the things I said was it might make their day or it might make yours. And I'd say as a team, it's definitely it's improved morale, kind of talking to donors. And it's meant that we've grown closer to them. Sometimes if you're working particularly in major gifts, you can spend a lot of time researching into people, particularly if you're a small team. I'm at the moment a one-person major gifts team, so you can spend a lot of time doing research into people, and it means that sometimes they can become just a person on your database rather than being a person who might want to help solve a problem. And by calling them, it's meant that, yeah, even if we've had a relationship with them in the past, or we have a relationship with them, by calling them, it just adds another level. And it means we have better conversations with people. You can have better correspondence with people as well. And it means you can personalize your stewardship to that individual and hopefully enable them to have a better experience with the charity. It feels more like you're calling a friend rather than this unidentified person, as it were. And I would say has actually helped, particularly if we receive donations, if we've got permissions, just pick up the phone to say, wow, thank you, that's fantastic. And rather than, I mean, I don't know how many people look at email sometimes, and it's just it's unexpected to people that they'll receive a phone call for doing something which is actually quite fantastic what they've done. And I was thinking about this, about if it's had any actual impact. And two of the people who, there's two people who give to our kind of mid-level regular giving club, as it were. And there've been two people that have been up for renewal this year, and I've had really great conversations with them over the phone over the last couple of months, and both of them have actually committed to renew for another 5 years. So that has been really good. I've only just thought of that, Rob. But yeah, that's one of the things that it's not necessarily something that you can measure the impact of immediately. It's something that helps build a better culture and better relationships with people, and it may help kind of raise the level across the board rather than it being a direct result. But that's been fabulous. I've really enjoyed that one as well, because I've got to know so many more donors. So yeah, and another really easy one has been thanking on anniversaries. So I was looking through the pipeline and saw somebody who had given a year ago, and I wrote them a little handwritten card, say, oh, it's been a year since you donated, this is what we've been up to, love to have a chat with you, love to have a coffee with you. And we just received £1,000 in the post, £1,000 as a check in the post, which is it was a really easy, simple thing to do, but it meant, well, it's unexpected for them. And then, I mean, we weren't writing it with any expectation either. It was a genuine thank you, but it just ended up being having a positive impact on our bottom line, which is fantastic. The other one is sneak peek / inside scoop. So we've got a couple of donors who we've got quite a few donors who we've kind of wanted to let them know about a couple of projects before we've gone public with them, to give them the opportunity to solve a problem maybe before we go out publicly with it. And that's been really positive as well. And we actually received a 50k donation for an upcoming project from somebody that we brought on board before we went public, and said, we think you'll be really interested and excited by this. We want you to talk with this person in our research team about it and about why it's so important. You can ask them all the questions you want. This is why we think you might be interested, but let us know, and let us know your questions and everything. And it worked, because I think because they've got a strong relationship with the charity. They want to be the first to know, particularly as it's like medical research as well. I mean, there's some things that we can't obviously go out public with, and there's some things that we can't go out to donors with beforehand. And obviously you've got to work within the parameters of what you can and can't do. But if there are areas where there is flexibility and that you can go out to certain individuals before it goes beforehand, they're kind of part of the family of the charity, as it were. They're part of the team, which is really nice. And it's really nice having them, because then you can also then ask them questions about what the charity should be doing as well. So yeah, there's been a couple of things that have just been they've not been big things. They've not been, I don't know, a whole restructure or anything like that. They've just been really small, kind of actionable things, which I think is important, because sometimes it can be so overwhelming when you come away with so many great ideas of things you might want to do, that you then don't do any of it. I don't know whether or not you ever have that.
Yeah, absolutely. In any given day, there's so many things you might feel you need to do, but wherever possible, I do my best to just think, what one thing could I do now, which is consistent with my overall direction of travel, but which would take me just 1 millimeter closer to that direction of travel being achieved. And it doesn't always work, but that's one of the ways I strive to do it. And I am helped in making those choices by my version of this kind of list. I've got 8 to 10 key principles, which I like to believe increase the chances that more people will get resources or courses or podcasts or whatever they might be, that inspire them to want to do more things that raise more money. I've got my principles which sum up what that looks like, and to other people those 10 things would be fairly meaningless, and yet they work for me because I know why I chose those and why I've even phrased them that way. And that leads me on to something I think that's quite interesting about this is we could be tempted to say, oh, right, I'm going to read the best book on fundraising or the best book on leadership, and I'm going to tell my team, these are the 10 things we're going to do from now on. And then we could be disappointed if a month later, nothing had changed, people weren't following through. It seems to me that a major reason why yours have had an effect is that the 2 or 3 of you in your team, you talked about them, you chose them together, you explained why this one is more important than that one. And it was a willing, conscious thing. And therefore, A, that you chose, you effectively signed up to, and B, that they're meaningful. You know, when you say stories, that's beyond a cliche. You know precisely why finding and sharing more real examples about the difference our charity makes is such a driver of success in fundraising. And that's part of the reason you feel that to be true is probably because of what we did on day one on my program, or maybe you read it in my book. But my point being, just to impose some of these things on a team, they will be experienced as the cliches they appear to be. So if a listener likes these ideas, beware, it's not a quick fix. One needs to sort of have it as a conversation and discuss why doing things in a certain way, certain principles, are more likely for our team or our cause or our strategy succeed, and for people to buy into those. And so, like I say, A, we were part of it, and B, it's meaningful beyond the cliche.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. Like, it was definitely a team effort. Like, I came to the table with the idea of making it, but when it came to actually deciding on what they were going to be, I mean, it only took us like 5 or 10 minutes to decide what they were going to be. Like, it wasn't this huge laborious meeting where we kind of vetoed and voted on lots of different ones. It was literally like 10 minutes of going, okay, what's important to us? And so, like, because sometimes, again, like, the process of making something like this can be really overwhelming, and you don't want to dive into the office politics of what should be what. But it was just really simple, and we've got a couple of joke ones in there, like we all like Encanto, so we don't talk about Bruno on there. Like, it's just silly things like that mean that it's ours. It's not something that somebody's come in and imposed upon us. It's something that we've all decided on and add to. So, like, as we continue and develop as a team, as we get more people involved, I mean, there may be more that get added on. The more we learn together as a team, like, it's not a fixed thing. It's just something that we can use to help align us. But also at the bottom, so we've got like the 10 philanthropy philosophies, but then at the bottom we've also got kind of 2 lists of what do we want our donors to feel when they support us, and how do we want to be as a team to achieve that. And like, we've kind of put in some words, kind of like hopeful and collaborative and things like that. And again, they are so corny, but they mean something to us, so it's fine. Again, you kind of don't want it to be, I don't know if there's like that classic work posters that you used to get that have like a picture of a tiger and then they've got motivation underneath them. That feels really uncomfortable and stuffy. And for some teams it might work, but for me, I find that a bit painful. But even though the words might be similar on the page, it's really different if you've created it and if you've got ownership over it. And I think that's the key difference.
Yes, yeah. And to state the obvious, another advantage you've got compared to what can often happen is, in many organizations, once a year we do an away day and we work out our strategy, and or we pay a consultant to help us with our strategy, and it may be highly brilliant and excellent and so on, and yet it remains in a desk drawer or on the J drive. And the problem with that is that if often we end up not executing on the strategy, it's because it's not live and present with us day in, day out on a wet Friday afternoon when one could have made a different, lazier choice. I think a strong advantage to this as a tactic is it makes it more likely that, when you're tired or when things are difficult, you're not sure how to proceed. If it's up on your board, or you've each got a picture of this on your phone that occasionally you notice, or on your note, if we're working from home, you've got a version of it as a screensaver or on a notice board at home. You don't have to be staring at it every day and chanting them like in some, cultish thing. But doing it your way increases the chances that your strategic priorities, and in particular, the better ways of working, they're more likely to be live in your nervous system, in your short and medium term memory. And therefore, as long as your principles are consistent with your strategy, you are more likely to do the right thing or a better thing, make a better choice on any given day of the week.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's just good having it also like just in your eye line, because it's what you say, it's about making the maybe making the harder choice, or like the more difficult choice when you're feeling a bit unmotivated or whatever. Like it could be that you get an email in and you've got to think, okay, how do I respond to this, or how do I move this donor forward? And it's about, firstly, because you've got something there, sometimes it gives you a moment to just have a breath and have a breather and just go, okay, right, what is the best thing to do? And then you can then choose from a selection of different things that are just there, that are ready for you to be able to possibly to do, which is, it's nice to just have it. It's quite, it's just a nice comforting thing to have there as a team, which is great.
And so, Grace, if someone's listening to this and they already have some kind of common sense principles and philosophies about how they do their fundraising, but they are now toying with the idea of making that more explicit for themselves or for a couple of teammates, do you have any last tips to help them with that?
Yeah. So I'd say number one is don't overthink it. It doesn't have to be an away day. It doesn't have to be a big long team meeting. Just get something on paper or get something on a whiteboard. And in fact, the beauty of a whiteboard is if you want to change a word, you can just swap it out, and it doesn't matter. You can change this and it can evolve. It doesn't have to be fancy. I think the main thing is just try it. It doesn't have to be 10, it could be 3, it could be anything, it could be any number. And just do it and find out and see if it works for you. And if it doesn't, at least you've tried something.
Yeah. And at the very least, you've asked yourself, what is important? What do I believe about what good fundraising looks like? And if that can be an ongoing reflective process, I really think it can't do any harm at all to your practice and your ongoing decisions about how you do things. And just after you said that, I remembered when I interviewed the brilliant Emily Casson, who's such an experienced fundraiser in the digital space. And when she talks in earlier podcast episodes we did about her 4 key principles, really short, sharp principles that have been her mantra for fundraising teams she's looked after. I really specifically remember asking her about one of the points, and she said, oh yeah, I just changed that last month. It's always evolving, Rob. If it's not working, if you can make it better, do that. So I think that, but I guess one caveat is don't go on and on to a point where there are 36 principles, because then it will all, they'll cease to be meaningful. They'll turn into gray slush, and you'll feel like they're cliches. So that's my one caveat. So keep it not too many, but just ongoingly. This is a conscious process of getting clear how I want to do my job, and backed up by certain philosophies or principles that you come to believe in. So Grace, thank you ever so much for coming along to share this tactic. I really appreciate it. I hope it helps some fundraisers out there. The book I mentioned for the listener is called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. Grace, just sometimes when people listen to these episodes, they follow up and get in touch. Are you on LinkedIn, and is that a place that you'd be happy for people to contact you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Grace Canning's on LinkedIn, and yeah, be lovely to have chats with people.
Great. So thank you ever so much, Grace. Best of luck with your fundraising, and I will catch up with you soon.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye.
Bye.
Grace Cannings, thank you very much for meeting me for this interview. I think, if I remember rightly, it was about 7 months ago you joined our Major Gifts Mastery Program, and you mentioned to me you found it helpful. Just before we go on with a short interview, what's your job title and where do you work?
So I work for Cure Parkinson's, and I am a Major Gifts Fundraising Officer.
Great. And yeah, I've got to know you over the last 6 months. You did the Major Gifts Mastery Program. If someone's weighing up whether to do that course, could you tell us what it was like for you to do, and some of the ways it might have helped you?
Yeah, sure. So I think the key thing that I've gained from this course is confidence. And that has been both within and talking to donors, but it's also been confidence within my team as well, which has been fabulous. I've personally really enjoyed it and have met many other major donor fundraisers and developed my network in that way. But in terms of what it's meant for my actual day-to-day work, it's had some really interesting results. So I think generally it's just improved the way I've been able to communicate with donors. There've been lots of different things that we've discussed, and one of those ways of communicating, such as giving people the inside scoop, has resulted in a 50k donation from somebody, which has been fabulous. And then I think going back to being kind of more confident, I'd say that it's helped me become more calm in meetings with donors. And I think it was maybe a couple of weeks after our first session, I was in a meeting with a donor and managed to secure a 25k gift from them, which was incredible. And it was the first meeting I'd actually run by myself without anybody else from my team being there. So it felt like a really big win for me. And then also alongside that, we've had more people renewing their donations and gifts. And I think just generally the level of communication that I've been able to give with people has been great. And yeah, I think if you have got the budget, or if you, I just implore anybody to go on this course. It's been fantastic. Yeah. Thank you, Rob.
And is there anything else about the way your program is structured that you think has been helpful for you?
Yeah, so I think the key thing has been consistency. So you meet, I think it's 6 times across maybe 6 or 7 months. And it's so helpful having those regular touch points, because it's so easy to go to a training course or go on a training day in particular, and you leave everything you learn on that training course at the door, or as soon as you leave, the rest of your job actually takes over, and it's so hard to then implement those things. Whereas this course, it's regular meetings, but also at every meeting there's also an opportunity to share something that you've done, and you become so inspired by what other fundraisers have done that you kind of think, okay, right, at the end of this, what can I actually action? What can I do? And you kind of feel that you're almost being not held accountable, but you feel really inspired to actually implement what it is that you've learned.
Yeah, people may often feedback that it's the power of the group that helps you believe that this stuff is really doable. If they can do it, why not me?
Yeah.
And so just before we finish, if someone's considering coming on the course and they're not quite sure, what would your advice be?
I would speak to somebody who might have already been on the course, because I found that really helpful. And also, I think, what would I do? That's not a very good answer. I'm trying to have a think for what my advice would be.
So Grace, if someone's thinking of coming on the course, what would your advice be?
I'd say implore your employers to get the budget for you to go on it, because it's been really beneficial for me. And yeah, it's just fantastic.
Thank you, Grace. So I look forward to catching up and hearing more about your progress soon. But for now, Grace, thanks for your help.
No worries. Thanks very much, Rob.
Bye.
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 Hi, my name is Grace Cannings. I'm a Major Gifts Fundraising Officer at Cure Parkinson's. I recently did Rob's course, and honestly, the improvement in my confidence over the last 6 months has been fabulous. And I've had a few gifts whilst doing the course of over 50k. It's been incredible. So if you can get on this course,